On Thursday, President Biden signed an executive order relating to property in Burma. I will read to you the executive order as follows. Executive Order on blocking property with respect to the situation in Burma. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S. Code 1701, IEEPA, the National Emergencies Act, 50 U.S. Code 1601, NEA, Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, 8 U.S. Code 1182F, and Section 301 of Title III United States Code. I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America, find that the situation in and in relation to Burma, and in particular the February 1st, 2021 coup in which the military overthrew the democratically elected civilian government of Burma and unjustly arrested and detained government leaders, politicians, human rights defenders, journalists, and religious leaders, thereby rejecting the will of the people of Burma as expressed in elections held in November 2020 and undermining the country's democratic transition and rule of law, constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. Accordingly, I hereby order, Section 1, A. All property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person of the following persons are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in any foreign person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State. 1. To operate in the defense sector of the Burmese economy or any other sector of the Burmese economy as may be determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State. 2. To be responsible for or complicit in or to have directly or indirectly engaged or attempted to engage in any of the following. A. Actions or policies that undermine democratic processes or institutions in Burma. B. Actions or policies that threaten the peace, security, or stability of Burma. C. Actions or policies that prohibit, limit, or penalize the exercise of freedom of expression or assembly by people in Burma, or that limit access to print, online, or broadcast media in Burma. Or D. The arbitrary detention or torture of any person in Burma or other serious human rights abuses in Burma. 3. To be or have been a leader or official of A. The military or security forces of Burma or any successor entity to any of the foregoing. B. The government of Burma on or after February 2nd, 2021. C. An entity that has or whose members have engaged in any activity described in subsection A2 of this section relating to the leader's or official's tenure. Or D. An entity whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order as a result of activities related to the leader's or official's tenure. 4. To be a political subdivision, agency, or instrumentality of the government of Burma. 5. To be a spouse or adult child of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. 6. To have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for or goods or services to or in order or in support of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. Or 7. To be owned or controlled by or to have acted or purported to act for or on behalf of directly or indirectly the military or security forces of Burma or any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. B. The prohibitions in subsection A of this section apply except to the extent provided by statutes or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted before the date of this order. Section 2. The prohibitions in Section 1 of this order include A. The making of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, and B. The receipt of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services from any such person. Section 3. A. The unrestricted immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States of non-citizens determined to meet one or more of the criteria in Section 1A of this order would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and the entry of such persons into the United States as immigrants or non-immigrants is hereby suspended, except where the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Homeland Security, as appropriate, determines that the person's entry would not be contrary to the interests of the United States, including when the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Homeland Security, as appropriate, so determines, based on a recommendation of the Attorney General, that the person's entry would further important United States law enforcement objectives. B. The Secretary of State shall implement this authority as it applies to visas pursuant to such procedures as the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security, may establish. C. The Secretary of Homeland Security shall implement this order as it applies to the entry of non-citizens pursuant to such procedures as the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Secretary of State, may establish. D. Such persons shall be treated by this section in the same manner as persons covered by Section 1 of Proclamation 8693 of July 24th, 2011, suspension of entry of aliens subject to United States Security Council travel bans and International Emergency Economic Powers Act sanctions. Section 4. A. Any transaction that evades or avoids, has the purpose of evading or avoiding, causes a violation of, or attempts to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. B. Any conspiracy formed to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. Section 5. I hereby determine that the making of donations of the types of articles specified in Section 203b2 of IEEPA 50 U.S. Code 1702b2 by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to Section 1 of this order would seriously impair my ability to deal with the national emergency declared in this order, and I hereby prohibit such donations as provided by Section 1 of this order. For the purposes of this order. Section 6. For the purposes of this order, A. The term entity means a partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization. B. The term government of Burma means the government of Burma, any political subdivision, agency, or instrumentality thereof, including the Central Bank of Myanmar, and any person owned or controlled by or acting for on behalf of the government of Burma. C. The term non-citizen means any person who is not a citizen or non-citizen national of the United States. D. The term person means an individual or entity. And E. The term United States person means any United States citizen, permanent resident alien, entity organized under the laws of the United States, or any jurisdiction within the United States, including foreign branches, or any person in the United States. Section 7. For those persons whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order who might have a constitutional presence in the United States, I find that because of the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously, prior notice to such persons of measures to be taken pursuant to this order would render those measures ineffectual. I thereby determine that for these measures to be effective in addressing the national emergency declared in this order, there need be no prior notice of a listing or determination made pursuant to Section 1 of this order. Section 8. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to take such actions, including the promulgation of rules and regulations, and to employ all powers granted to the President by IEEPA as may be necessary to carry out the purposes of this order. The Secretary of the Treasury may, consistent with applicable law, redelegate any of these functions within the Department of the Treasury. all departments and agencies of the United States shall take all appropriate measures within their authority to carry out the provisions of this order. Section 9. Nothing in this order is intended to affect the continued effectiveness of any action taken pursuant to Executive Order 13742 of October 7, 2016, termination of emergency with respect to the actions and policies of the government of Burma. Section 10. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to submit recurring and final reports to the Congress on the national emergency declared in this order, consistent with Section 401C of the NEA, 50 U.S. Code 1641C, and Section 204C of IEEPA, 50 U.S. Code 1703C. Section 11. A. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect 1. The authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or head thereof, or 2. The function of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. C. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. Joseph R. Biden, Jr.